What if the most important battlefield of the 21st century isn't a mountain pass or a stretch of ocean, but a concrete dock with cranes on it? Because while the world was watching trade wars and tariffs and headlines about factories, China was quietly doing something far bigger. It was buying the docks themselves. Today, Chinese companies own or operate terminals in more than 90 ports outside of China. That includes 34 of the 100 busiest ports on the planet. Chinese firms now run, or hold a stake in, roughly one-third of Africa's commercial ports. They control a container terminal in Europe's fifth largest port, and they just opened South America's first true deep-water Pacific hub. This is not an accident. This is a strategy, 2 decades in the making. And by the end of this video, you will understand exactly why. Let's start with the scale of it, because the numbers are almost hard to believe. China already handles about one-third of all maritime shipping volume on Earth. 6 of the 10 busiest container ports in the world are Chinese. Shanghai alone moves more containers in a single year than most countries move in a decade. But this video isn't about China's own coastline. It's about what happens when that same logic, get bigger, move faster, control the route, gets exported to other countries' coastlines. The company doing most of that exporting is called COSCO, the China Ocean Shipping Company. It's state-owned. It runs more than 1,300 vessels, and it calls at over 160 countries. One of its arms, COSCO Shipping Ports, exists purely to buy stakes in foreign terminals, and it has been shopping, aggressively, for 20 years. So, where has it been shopping? Let's go around the map. In Pakistan, there's Gwadar, a port built from almost nothing on the edge of the Arabian Sea, funded and constructed largely with Chinese money and sitting right at the mouth of routes that connect to the Persian Gulf. In Sri Lanka, there's Hambantota, a port so expensive to build and so underused once it opened that Sri Lanka eventually handed China a 99-year lease on it, just to manage the debt. In East Africa, there's Djibouti, a tiny country wedged next to one of the busiest shipping choke points on Earth, the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, where China opened its very first overseas military base, right next to its own commercial port. And it's not just poorer strategically located countries either. In Greece, Chinese state shipping giant COSCO owns a majority stake in the port of Piraeus and turned it, in under a decade, from a sleepy Mediterranean dock into one of the busiest ports in Europe. In Peru, COSCO holds 60% of the new Chancay megaport, with exclusive rights locked in for 60 years. A port built specifically to move South American goods to Asia without touching a single United States port along the way. Here's the part that should make you pause. Ports don't just move boxes. Whoever controls a port can influence which ships get priority berthing, how fast containers clear customs, which cargo moves first when there's a bottleneck, and in a crisis, whether a country's imports and exports keep flowing at all. A port is commercial infrastructure, but it is also, quietly, leverage. So how does China actually get these deals? The pattern, in almost every case, looks the same. A country needs infrastructure it cannot afford. Chinese state banks offer a loan. A Chinese state construction firm builds the port, and a Chinese state shipping company ends up either owning it outright or holding the lease. It's marketed under the banner of the Belt and Road Initiative, President Xi Jinping's trillion-dollar answer to a simple question: how do you make the entire world's trade routes run through you? Critics call this a debt trap, pointing straight at Hambantota, where Sri Lanka couldn't repay its loans and lost control of the port for nearly a century. Now, is this about trade, or is it about the military? Officially, almost every one of these ports is commercial. Unofficially, a container terminal built to modern naval specifications with a deep-water berth and reinforced docks can service a lot more than cargo ships if the relationship between two governments ever changes. Djibouti already proved that, a commercial port and a military base sitting side by side. Analysts call this dual-use infrastructure. Officially, it's just business. Strategically, it's optionality. Naturally, other major powers noticed. The United States has started charging steep new fees on ships that are Chinese-built, Chinese-owned, or Chinese-operated. fees that will climb to as much as $140 per net ton by the year 2028. The G7 launched its own infrastructure plan to compete, called Build Back Better World. India has been racing to build and fund its own ports across the Indian Ocean, specifically to counter Chinese-owned terminals showing up on its doorstep. If you want to understand where global trade is actually heading, forget the headlines for a second and follow the concrete. That's where Trade Explained will meet you again in the next video.